Hi, I'm Lyn St, and this is Cars and Culture with Stein.
Well, I'm going to begin with something that I read in Auto Week. Lyn St. James, it was written, has had the kind of career most racers would be jealous of. In a decades-long path, she raced at every major endurance sports car event in the world, qualified for the Indianapolis 500 7 times, and set impressive speed records. She didn't come from a racing family or start karting as a toddler. She just had the sheer force of will and determination to push herself into a sport largely devoid of women. Now she's an automotive Hall of Famer. Congratulations, Lyn.
Thank you very much. Still hasn't sunk in yet, but thank you so much. Just hearing that, kind of also puts me in perspective of just how amazing it is.
When you think about some of those things that Auto Week wrote, and we go to endurance racing, we go to obviously Indianapolis, and we go to the fact that you didn't come from a racing family and actually started when you were 27. You had a Ford Pinto. You drove to work as a secretary and a piano teacher. It's kind of crazy to think about where we sit today, right, Lyn?
Yeah, but think about, I grew up in a different time. I grew up in the 60s, 50s and 60s, and then sort of came into my adulthood, I guess you'd say, more in the 70s. And so I was doing what society expected women to do. But I was incomplete. I knew that there was something missing. I used to drive my first husband crazy, trying to figure that out. And in most cases, it probably would be for most women to have children, to have children and have a family. But that wasn't my dream or my passion. And actually it wasn't his either. And so we built a business together, and then we went to the races as fans together. And then I saw real people drove race cars. When I went to the Indy 500, those are superhumans. You see, Mario Andretti, AJ Foyt, those are not real people.
Yes.
and so that didn't click. The sport clicked, but not the activity, and seeing me in that role. And so then, through going to 24 hours of Daytona and the 12 hours of Sebring, and yes, there were the superhumans were there too, but so were some just human beings. And then of course finding out about Sports Car Club of America. So, I just took this path of fan, pursue something that's interesting, and then realizing that maybe there was a role for me in that. And once I did, I've never looked back. But I think about the 70s, when I saw the Ruth Ginsburg film and documentary, and there was a lot about what was going on in the 60s and 70s. And then I thought, well, that's when I was growing up. I don't quite remember that was the way it was, because when you're in it, when you're like a kid, you don't always see things. I have this theory that decades make a difference, and it's not only the decades in the timing, it's how old you are when it's happening, because you process information differently. And so when I reflected back on those 2 decades, particularly the 60s and 70s, it looked different than what I thought it was at the time. And so I thought women were crazy, to be honest, that they were out there burning the bras and doing crazy, things. And look, then of course I meet Billie Jean King, and I kind of had a different experience about what women, when I saw her beat Bobby Riggs on television. I was a tennis player, and I knew I was never going to be a pro or anything, and I remember saying to myself, if she can do that, then I should be able to get behind the wheel of a race car, even if it's a Pinto. It just sort of set a tone, of not just an image, but I think a tone of kind of stepping into something that maybe would be not considered traditional.
1973, she beat Bobby Riggs at the Houston Astrodome and changed a lot of things as it related to sport. But your big moment came when you went to the 24 hours of Daytona and thought, oh my goodness, you're sitting outside turn 1, you had a blanket, you had a cooler, you stayed all night, and you were mesmerized by what was going on there. And then you go to Sebring, the 12 hours of Sebring, and there's this guy named Steve McQueen who's driving. That was your light bulb moment even prior to the Billie Jean moment, correct?
Well, about the same time, really. Billie Jean was 73, and I think it was 74. It was in that same year or two, so things come in increments, you know what I mean? The impressions, not decisions, but impressions that start noodling through your brain that cause you to take action. They come, you talk about an aha moment maybe, but it was really more of a little of this, a little of that, watching the brakes glow in turn one from the outside when, and I was in the stands, and then being able to walk through the garages and see the people working. And I mean, it was a process. It was a process of information flowing into me, resonating with me. And so it wasn't an aha moment. It was like, okay, little pieces are coming into this, Lyn, and it's all sticking to you. So listen to that and then do something about it.
You were bitten by the racing bug, but how was that received by your friends and family at the time?
Well, fortunately, my husband at the time was pretty much as excited as I was. And I was old, I was 27. So even though, you do pay respect for what your parents think, you're really not paying that much attention anymore. And so my mom was always worried, because she always worried about me, but so, and my friends, to be really honest, I mean, the only friends I had were the people I worked in business with my husband, and then the people I play tennis with. When you're working and you're owning and operating a business, you're an entrepreneur, you don't have any time. I didn't have any time to go do anything socially, that had no meaning, to be honest. I played tennis to be fit and to be competitive, to kind of keep my competitive juices going. And then I worked. And then of course, when we did start racing, the neighborhood didn't appreciate the fact that, we would be cranking a motor up at 2 a.m. to get ready to go to the race that weekend. So we
I can imagine
that weird family on the corner that was doing something different,
causing quite a stir in the neighborhood.
Yes.
Incredible. As you rose through the ranks, you did so at a time, as you mentioned, that women's rights were enjoying a bit of a reawakening in the United States. Could you have had such a successful career in another generation?
Certainly not prior to. I mean, you think of Denise McCluggage, you think of, we just saw a documentary on Betty Skelton. Paula Murphy's going to be coming out. There's a new documentary coming out on Paula Murphy. I kind of watched Shirley Muldowney and Janet Guthrie. And so they were denied, in my opinion, the opportunity to have a career, a respected career, and because of the decades that they were doing it. And then if I think about it, I would have had a hell of a career if I had started, if the same person that you're talking to, with the same brain and the same
determination,
if I had been 20 years younger, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
Or it had been 20 years later when I started. Ooh, that would have been sweet. Not complaining about what I've had. I'm very proud, but there was a lot of unfinished because I was so late coming into all of this. I was late understanding my own strength. I was late. I was late in a lot of things that, that I would have, if I'd had that benefit. And of course, I don't care. It wouldn't have made a difference if women were not as accepted, but as they are now, I don't care. I would have still, channeled through. My determination, I will not be denied. I mean, that's very much my DNA.
Well, you may have been late, but you were also at the right time. And you read an article when you were starting out, after you'd won some races, a few championships, and Ford wanted to provide more opportunities for women in non-traditional roles with the hopes that women would buy more cars. And you decided to approach Ford. And 3 years later, you were an official Ford driver. It only took 3 years, but determination, right, Lyn?
Oh yeah, I'm convinced they finally said, if we don't hire this girl, she's going to drive us crazy. Because I'd send them race results and every little thing, and I were probably a half a dozen. Len Pounds was a guy that I remember reading about in Speed Sport News, because Chris Economic would always have a name or two that he'd drop into his column. And so, I read a lot. I read Automotive News, I read Advertising Age, I read, all of the racing publications, Auto Week, Speed Sport News. because I wanted to just wean as much information about the industry as I possibly could. And of course, if they quote somebody, that's a name, man. And that was before Google. How do you find out that person? How do you get their address? How do you get, a mailing address? And so I bugged people. I told somebody recently that, and I've never told it until recently, I finally fessed up to this. I created a company called Creative Images. And then what I would do is write letters, sponsorship letters. And I'm sure some of the letters I wrote to Ford back then, I would use different names when I signed them, because I was promoting Lyn St. James and I couldn't sign it Lyn St. James. I thought that's so obnoxious. I mean, so I would make up a name and make my company look bigger and make it look legitimate. So, I bugged him. I did bug Ford Motor Company, but I have to credit, and I will, Walter Hayes. And you probably remember the name, even though you're quite younger, but he was one of the founders of the whole Cosworth package, that, partnership that he put together. And he was in the UK. He came over to the US as the head of public affairs at the time that Ford was, unbeknownst to me, getting ready to get back into motorsports. And I was fortunate enough to meet him at a dealer event that I was hired to stand out in the parking lot and talk about these cars, show cars that they had. And when he asked me what I wanted from Ford Motor Company, and I told him I wanted 2 engines because somebody would build a race car for me, I got one. It blew up, unfortunately, but that was the door opener that enabled me to keep my foot in the door until Ford announced their SVO racing program. And so I have to give credit to where credit's due.
You also have to give credit in 1992 to Dick Simon, retired race car driver and racing team owner, who took a chance on you, signed you up for the Indy 500. Tell me about that day when you knew that you had a ride at the Indy 500.
Well, it actually came in 1988. Dick gave me the opportunity to drive an Indy car, which is all I had on my agenda to do. I wanted to know what it was like to drive a perfect race car. And he gave me that opportunity. And at the end of the day, I actually did really well. And at the end of the day, he said to me, "We can do this." He didn't say, "You can do this." He said, "We can do this." So that was the moment I went, oh my God, I have a team owner who is an IndyCar team owner who sees my talent, who believes in me. I have to try this now. I have to make this happen. And so then that took 4 years in sponsorship searching. And when I showed up at the Indianapolis 500, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway at the beginning of the month with a race car and my name on it and my sponsor name on it, and
JCPenney, correct?
And JCPenney, yeah. And it was almost like it was Christmas every day. It was just like Christmas every day.
Wow. And then you end up winning the Rookie of the Year that year. The cherry on top of the whole thing, Lyn.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a very goal-oriented person, and that was not on my goal. I looked at how that sort of happened from previous years. We had 9 rookies that year and some very talented rookies that year. And I did have a better fortunate race than the others, but at the same time, it was a very unusual race. I still thought, there's no way they're going to pick me. There's no way. And, I'm a disruptor here, and that's okay. I'm here though, and when they announced that, I was stunned. So, and I remember Dick saying, this is something that will mean a lot more to you as the years go by. So what do you mean, but.
Boy, isn't that the truth? And, you talk about the fact that you did not experience any sexism at the amateur level. Your husband and you went to races, and as an amateur, you're so busy getting your own car together. There's no time for, as you once said, no time for that. But you get to Indianapolis and things are a little different. And in fact, you described, even as a spectator in 1966, you couldn't get into Gasoline Alley, and you described it as not a welcoming place as a female. And so all of a sudden you're there as a driver, again, in a different era, pulled forward, a significant number of years. But how did you feel the reception was to you then in that very first year?
It was quiet in the beginning, is the best way I can put it. It was almost like I wasn't really there. It was kind of, And that was okay with me. That's kind of the way I've always, the way I have treaded the turf is to just show up, do your job, and let your lap times, your performance speak for itself. I've never been one to pound a drum or, try to make any attention. And so what was great though, I think I have to almost, I'm making an assumption because no one, you guys should talk to Mario Andretti and AJ Foyt and see what they thought, because I don't know what they
Yeah. Yeah. Good idea.
But what I think is that because I had been racing for Ford and I'd been in the Trans Am series, I'd been in the IMSA Camel GT series, my name was showing up. I mean, I was kind of a veteran race car driver in some of their eyes, I think. Never expected me to get to the Indy level because let's face it, my background and experience, that wasn't a natural path for me to be there. But I think it was like, oh, I mean, I got this feeling that they would look at me and say, oh, hi, Lyn. And then like, what are you doing here? It was more of a big question mark. And I think that because my performance throughout the month of May got better and better and better and better and thank God it was when we were there the whole month, that I think as my performance progressed throughout the month, they gave me that latitude to just say, well, let's see how she does, as opposed to not the attitude of what the hell are you doing here? It wasn't that. It was more like, what are you doing here? It was kind of this disconnect. But then it was, well, let's just see. I think that's kind of how I felt they were thinking, but I don't know what they were really thinking.
But
I never asked them.
Yeah. you certainly grabbed your share of attention, obviously, early on. And the better you did, the more attention that came to you. Did you feel that you were all of a sudden carrying this mantle to some extent? Did you inherit that and then accept it and say, well, I'm gonna do some trailblazing here?
Not in 92. In 92, I accepted it because I mean, I was like, wow. I mean, because I watched what Janet got a lot of attention too, but it was a lot of more controversy. It was more, I don't know, it was more disruptive. And where with me, it was kind of more this curiosity, but again, with more respect because of my past history was recent, and it was respectful. I mean, to race at Le Mans, to have wins at Daytona and Sebring, and I mean, it was respectful. And so I was treated with respect, but more with still question. And but I did get a lot of attention. But to be honest, I had a business hat on. I represented J.C. Penney. I wanted them to get a lot of attention. That was what I sold. I mean, to a certain degree. And so that's what I had hoped was going to happen. But as far as the sense of responsibility, that didn't come until after the race. After the race, I got so much fan mail. And it started to build even during the month when people started cheering for me or yelling my name out. I mean, at one time that happened and I thought they were yelling AJ Foyt, and the gal working for me looked at me and said, no, Lyn, they're yelling for you. And so that's when I'm like, whoa, this is bigger than me. And then that's of course when that's when I got the fan mail. That's when I started my own foundation. That's when the Billie Jean King lessons started to come into my brain, to realize this is bigger than me. This isn't about me. I'm here to do something that is going to help others. And so I started to really, but it took me a while to I had to walk into that space. In August, okay, Indy happens in May, right? In August, I was in Akron, asked to do the TV commentating for the Soapbox Derby. And I'm like, oh man, this is cool. I've always heard about the Soapbox Derby. It turned out that it was an all-girl final, and all girls won they have like 3 divisions, I think, all girls. So I'm on this podium, which is nothing more than a flatbed trailer with, and with all the winners, the 3 gals that won the overall of their category. And the guy that was the major commentator says to this little girl who I'm ready to present a trophy to, do you know who this is? And I'm like, I'm Lyn St. James, the Indy 500 racer. She looks up and she goes, no. I'm like, this is great. I thought I had this heavy weight of responsibility, and I realized this kid doesn't even know who I am, which put me right in my place, settled me down, and said, Lyn, don't get carried away here.
How did your life, beyond the fan mail, and I'm sure there was bags of it, how did your life change? How did the day-to-day change that maybe you didn't expect? Were the Trips to the grocery store a little different going forward?
No, I mean, you know, every year when when you are successful at competing at the Indy 500, starting the race, you get one of these. You get this ring,
Yes.
and the ring has a green
Beautiful
stone,
ring.
and it's a beautiful ring. It looks like a lot of people's class rings,
It does.
and I didn't go to college, so I don't have a class ring. And so the only time that it really changed, because I wear this ring all the time, and I wear it proudly, is that I would get challenged. Oh, that's a beautiful ring. Oh, is that your class ring? No, no. Well, what is it? And I'd say, well, it's great for racing in the Indy 500. And I literally, one time I was coming at the grocery store, going through the checkout, and this woman who was at the cash register, she goes, "You did not." I'm having an argument with her. The guy standing behind me, waiting to go through, said, "For God's sake, lady, she really did. Will you just let her through? Because I know I was holding the line up." And so, I've had some humorous moments like that. But the reality was, in fact, I tell the story because it's true. Literally 2 days after the 500, I'm in Detroit because the next race was the Detroit race, right? I'm not racing in Detroit, but because I'm under contract to Ford, Ford asked me to be there to make an appearance. And now I'm there with Scott Pruitt and a bunch of the other drivers who are actually racing that weekend. And they're like, "Hey, Lyn, how you doing?" And I mean, all of a sudden this conversation was like totally normal, and nobody said a word about me racing in the Indy 500 and getting Rookie of the Year. And finally I said, "Did you guys watch the Indy 500, by the way?" It's like, come on, at least tell me congratulations or good job or something. So I did expect the world to change. And you know what? It really didn't. I changed because I think I did something that I, to be honest, wasn't sure I could really do. And because I desperately wanted to, and then I did, and I did it well. There was a sense of pride and fulfillment in me, even though it was unfulfilled because I was not done yet. I wanted to come back and I wanted more. But I think but other than that, really, my day to day, I still went to work, did my stuff. Really life goes on. You think these things are going to be that big of a change. Maybe when you win the Indy 500, I've heard them say, the winners have said that their life does change, but I think really my life pretty much goes on.
Although your life did change, you got in touch with a woman named Billie Jean King. When did that happen? And what was that first conversation like?
Well, actually, I met Billie in the 80s because I was invited to go to this big gala in New York by Anheuser-Busch. And it was for the Women's Sports Foundation, which she founded. And so I met her, which was life-changing, just to meet your shero. And then listening to Billie, if you are in her presence for more than 5 minutes and you don't think that you have some responsibility to change the world, you're deaf. I mean, you're blinded, you're deaf, because she comes on so strong. And so, but it was about women in sports. And motorsports was such a small piece, and certainly almost an insignificant piece as far as youth or other girls and women, as opposed to soccer and tennis and golf and all these other sports, basketball. I mean, there was so much work that needed to be done for women in sports. I took on that role and learned and became a volunteer, and I worked for them, and then I became president of the organization. This was all before I did Indy. So where I was the most excited with Billie was when I invited her to come back to Indy in 2004, I think it was. She was the honorary starter on qualifying day.
2007.
2007, I think.
And there were 3 female drivers, right?
And that was, to have more than one actually there, and to have them all there. And we did a photo with her. But Billie was she loved it. I mean, she was so into the whole experience. She's most honorary starters, they said, they show up, they're there for an hour and they leave. Billie was there all day.
Wow. What do you remember from the first conversation that you had with her?
Well, when you have a conversation, that first one, you listen. I mean, Billie's, again, she's there to teach. She's the teacher. So that was more awe. It was more awestruck and listening to Billie talk. It wasn't until probably, it was after I had already raced in the Indy 500 that I actually had a conversation. And that's when she was very, yes, complimentary, but really challenging me, like I wasn't doing enough, even though I was still racing. I mean, most of the athletes that worked for the Women's Sports Foundation, like Billy, were former athletes. They were the Olympic champions of the past, the Peggy Flemings, the Carol Manns, the Donna Deveronas, these were I was still competing in the 90s, and yet she's like challenging me. You aren't doing enough. Why aren't there more women here? Why aren't there more women? I'm like, Billy, I'm trying, I'm working on it. I have a driver development program. I'm going to go-kart races. I'm like, I'm trying, but she would just pound on me. And so, that's Billy.
Let's go to present day a little bit. There appears to be a serious push these days to get more women in motorsports. Stefano Domenicali was on this program recently, and he talked about the push that Formula One is making. This has to thrill you to no end.
Well, it does, because I now know that the sport is paying attention. I think it's sad because it is, I think, as a result of the social injustices that have occurred over the last couple of years. And I think it's raised such a stir that it's causing people to do what they know they should do. There are some who really are believable, who really believe it. I mean, who really understand, and it's not because of a reaction to a social injustice, it's because they know it's the right thing to do, and because it's also the right business thing to do to help grow the sport. But at least whatever the motivation is, at least it's happening. I have felt like the Lone Ranger for decades, and now I know I'm not. I mean, now I can step into space, and I'm grabbing arms and holding hands and pulling and working together. I'm a little still reluctant and cautious about how serious it is, and how willing they might be to really be proactive enough to put it as a priority versus as just something that we're adding to our list of things to do.
Lip service.
Yeah. I still worry about that. And also I mean, I'm getting old. And so, and some of the new leaders in the sport, if they really, I mean, I'm going to use John Doonan as an example. John Doonan is now the president of IMSA. I've known John when he was at Mazda, and he was a supporter. He has been a supporter of diversity and youth. It created programs through the Mazda program, that he did. And he was a supportive of my foundation when I was doing my driver development for decades. And John's still young, fortunately. And so I know that it's in his heart, it's in his belief system. But not everybody, it comes from that same space. A lot of people are still coming from, oh God, we got to do this. How are we going to do this? That's a reactionary, it's just different. And so I just hope that the passion or the commitment, it isn't really passion, but the commitment is strong enough that they make it a priority. Because if they don't, you can't, if you don't change the way you do business, you can't expect a different result.
Yeah.
And so I want to see the changes, and we aren't seeing that many changes.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you see talented female racers rising to the top of professional motorsports? I
see talented female race car drivers not rising to the top level. And what's disturbing is that we don't have a deep enough talent pool. We don't have enough numbers that if the few that are there fall off because they age out or they burn out and get discouraged and move on, to something else, that we don't have a strong enough pipeline to bring it in. And so that'll end up with being a status quo, or we'll end up just, oh, well, she almost got there. I mean, she almost got there, and then, oh, here's the next one. We'll see how she does. It can't be that way. We have to build the pipeline.
We've had Samantha Tan on this program, Chinese Canadian race car drivers doing exceptionally well in endurance. Has the dream of being a 24-hour of Le Mans driver, but she admitted that she is one of very few when she looks around at her peers, especially in those early, I would say even pre-teen years of learning to drive a race car. Is that, would imagine that you concur that there just aren't enough avenues, maybe to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, like the Iron Dames team, which is supported by Deborah Marin, her Iron, Iron. Here's a woman who is completely dedicated and committed to this, and funding a team. And they were just on the podium, on the pole and on the podium at a World Endurance Championship, 6 hours of Monza. And those drivers, they're excellent, but they're all, I don't know their exact ages, but they're like 20s and 30s, and so, which is actually the right age. You all of us mature and get better, and they've been racing for well over 10 years, each one of them. The problem is that I so worry that it's like, oh, well, that's a great example, but then it's fixed. It isn't fixed. What's going to fix it is, where are those next generations coming in? What are we doing with those quarter midget racers and those go-kart racers that are out there? And there's no program. There's no system. Every other sport have clinics or coaching programs or actual, you look at the tennis camps that they have down in Florida. I mean, they are grooming youth, and all over the world, the countries are funding their young athletes to represent their company or their country. Sorry, we don't have that in the United States. So it's a free for all. Everybody figure it out on their own. And so there's no structure, and if there's no change to create a structure to develop talent, and it isn't just women, it's other young who don't come from a family that have money, or don't come from, where some benefactor goes, oh, this kid's great, and I'm going to fund that kid. We're still relying on independent or corporate or family money, because there's no structure. There's no structure in place.
Fairly or unfairly, racing is still often referred to as so-called old boys network. But as women rise to the top of the corporate world, shouldn't they do all they can to further other women in motorsports?
Well, you would like that. I would hope that. I mean, I dream that there will be a female Roger Penske on the timing stand of an IndyCar program, or a NASCAR and all of that. The thing is that, let's face it, it's not that it's just a good old boy network. It is a network of passionate people. And we all know that even the corporate funding comes from golf. If the CEO likes golf, it comes to racing. If the CEO or the chairman likes racing, that tends to still, unfortunately, kind of fall into place even today. And we don't have enough women, and that's partly why the Women in Motorsports North America program that we now have, which is really a community of professionals that are in the sport, that I'm so excited, because they have shown up and said, how can we make change here? Part of this is these are very veteran women and men that support us in this industry. They need to take up some leadership and start sharing their passion with their peers, or so that those women that are CEOs or CMOs or CFOs start to realize that they have peers, meaning other women executives who have the passion, and can start sharing that passion. I really feel it's everybody's responsibility. It's the Alba Collins of the world, who was the GM rep for NASCAR forever, came out of Puerto Rico, has an amazing story, and went to Grindstone Works, and now is highly regarded, now works at Hendrick as the director of motorsports. I want Alba, you need to be out there talking to other women in engineering or other women executives. So I think it's our responsibility, meaning the women who have been successful in the sport. Let's celebrate the people who are successful, and let them go out and help educate and communicate and activate new people to come in. And that's new. It's not just kids. I mean, I've been sort of focused on the kids because of the youth effort that it takes for drivers. If you haven't had a successful race team effort and program by the time you're 25, unfortunately, I don't care what gender you are, you're going to be aged out. You
Right.
have to show some success. It's different in the business side of our sport. And if we had more women successful as CEOs, whether it's in this industry or in industries that support this industry, I think we would then be able to see more support. I think more women would then say, wait a minute, Why aren't we hiring a woman engineer? Why aren't we hiring, a woman mechanic? Why aren't we hiring a woman driver? They would start to pay attention to that. And so it's going to take a little time, but I'm convinced that this effort will take us there.
Are you still in touch with Billie Jean about all of this?
Oh, I am. Just talked to her not that long ago. Yeah. I'm counting on her to show up at one of our future events. Because if she talks to you guys, I said, you're going to walk away going, holy crap, I got to go to work.
I want to talk. You mentioned Roger Penske. He appeared on this program last year in a wonderful interview, and of course, we all know about the captain's accomplishments. But I want to talk about the letter that he wrote to you. And this was the case of not only shock and awe for being for finding out that you're admitted into the Automotive Hall of Fame, but Roger wrote the letter. Tell me about that. Well,
it was mind-boggling. It was right before Christmas, and I mean, it was an email, and I opened up my emails, and I went. I mean, I'm talking to myself. I have an email from Roger Penske. I don't get emails from Roger Penske. It was like, is this for real? And then I opened it, and now I'm reading it, and he's telling me that I've been inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame, of which he was inducted in 2015, and congratulating me. And I'm like, I'm stunned. And then attached is the letter, officially from the Automotive Hall of Fame telling me that. And I woke up I did kind of cry and scream and say a few things. I woke up the next morning and I thought, I think I had a dream, but
it's not real. It can't be real.
Yeah. And so, cause I have some vivid dreams sometimes, but it doesn't get any better than this. I mean, this man is the most iconic, the most successful, the most poised, passionate human leader, in our sport. And now with all of his businesses in the automotive industry, it used to just be racing and then trucks and, Hertz. And I mean, it was kind of, I never really looked at him as the automotive industry. And of course, now you pick up automotive news and those top 100 dealers that you guys list every year. I mean, he's right at the top or within the top 2 or 3. And so he now speaks to the industry, the whole automotive industry. He speaks to the motorsports industry, and he's ageless. And, we all know he's not going to be here forever because none of us are, but at the same time, he almost seems like he will be. It's like, what would life in our industry be without a Roger Penske? So,
but that must be the ringtone on your phone, right, Lyn?
It is. I'm so sorry.
No problem. It's appropriate.
You're talking about Roger Penske, and the next thing you know,
and then the next thing you know, there's a car.
You hear an Indy car going around the racetrack. Yeah. So anyway,
you have met presidents. You met President Reagan, President George H.W. Bush, President Clinton. Where does this honor rank for you? And by the way, you were also named by Sports Illustrated as among the top 100 women athletes of the century, Lyn.
The 20th century, Jason. And I was 98. I saw that and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I don't run very well. But yeah. Well, to answer that question, I think being in the Oval Office and being at the White House and meeting presidents, is an extraordinary experience because of the history that you are now. You are in a moment of time. But to be really honest and candid, I was there with a group of women athletes. Invited with a group of athletes from the Women's Sports Foundation. So yes, it wasn't Lyn St. James only. I was part of a group. Very honored and very respectful to have those opportunities. I think when you have a one-on-one that's really honoring you, those are, to be really honest, a recent highlight was Amelia Island. When I was the honoree at Amelia Island, all of the previous honorees were my heroes, the Derek Bells and Redmond, and these are people that I just have admired for decades. And so when you get a singled out moment in your life that honors your history, your body of work, And that's where the Roger Penske thing becomes so significant, because that means he acknowledges that too. And it's not like I hang out with Roger. It's not like, hey, what do you think? What did you think about me being at Indy? We don't have those conversations. So I don't know what he thinks or, knows about me. And so that was a double singled out moment of Lyn St. James saying, holy cow, so I'd have to say that does take, that goes to the top of the list, compared, and I don't want to compare it to going to the White House or the president, because it's different.
It's a long way from a cooler and a blanket watching the Daytona races, right?
Yeah. And I got a couple buddies that were around in that era too. I've got one guy that's like my brother, that he was my crew chief in my Pinto, and then I had him as my crew chief at Indy in '94 when I was outside second row. So, we've been together for a long time.
What do you hope, if we talk again in 5 years, what do you hope for the state of motorsports, male or female, in terms of progress?
Well, I'm not a numbers game in the sense of saying, oh, we got a 50% or 25% or whatever, but I would hope that we would have more women in leadership. When I say leadership, literally at the top level, not because of a number, but because they're passionate. Truly, and I don't know how long it'll take, but truly having a woman that has come up through the ranks of their business life, and at the same time, they've carried that passion of motorsports all the way. So it's in her DNA. And I would like to see more of that, not just one, but more of that. And I obviously want to see a woman win the Indy 500. I in my lifetime, I believe that can happen. There's the talent is there, and the door's been knocked open enough with Danica taking the lead, with having 9 women have competed in the Indy 500. So, and of course, it also is my thing, so I really believe that in my lifetime, I'll see a woman win the Indy 500. And I would love to just see, when I go to go-kart races, or I see a lot of young girls. So it's not like we need, what we need is a program. I want to see a program that is just not about women, but it's about really structuring, building a youth program to bring more talented young people into our sport.
One final thing. What will you say in your speech tonight that is your that is the Lyn St. James Indy 500 moment of the speech? I know you've been writing and rewriting the speech a few times, but what's the line that you really want the crowd to take away?
I would not be in a position to even have had a career in motorsports if it wasn't for the people that said yes, and that were voices in the room on my behalf when I wasn't there. There were critical individuals, and I'm going to name them, because that's what made it happen. Not my persistence, not my talent, none of that. That all had to be there too. But all of that would have been there if it had been there without those people saying yes, and without those voices in the room. I know for a fact it wouldn't happen.
Congratulations on being an inductee into the Automotive Hall of Fame, and congratulations on a wonderful career. And Women in Motorsports in North America is the name of the organization. And Lyn St. James, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to share.
The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein, former publisher of Automotive News, is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on SiriusXM Business Radio.